Welcome to Aircrew Interview. I'm Mike Young, your host, and this is a very special episode as we have an exclusive and extended interview with the brilliant Captain Joe. This is the first podcast and detailed interview Joe has done, and it's great he has chosen Aircrew Interview to share his story so far. This episode we go into detail about his early beginnings in aviation, his time flying the A320, his current role on the 747, and of course his brilliant YouTube channel. We were also very rudely interrupted in the middle of the interview from Joe's hotel, who decided to do a test fire alarm for 30 minutes, which you will be able to hear us chatting about in this interview. So please enjoy, and make sure you head over to our website www.aircrewinterview.tv for more in-depth interviews. Thank you and enjoy. Okay, so Joe, when did you first become interested in aviation?
Mike, it's a long time ago if I think back to it. I was, want to say sort of 13, 14 years old. A good friend of my parents, he had a little biplane and he invited me to go out for a spin with it. And literally a minute after takeoff, he sort of goes, "Hey Joe, take over control." And the cool thing was that I was in the front seat and he was sitting behind me. It was a little Christian Eagle. And so I couldn't really see what he was doing. And I was all by myself in the front of the cockpit. And but it was really, I want to say, from the joystick, it's just like a wooden pole in the Christian Eagle. It went from there, feeling wise, right into my heart, and it got me all excited, and I just wanted to do more of that. That's how it started. So I wouldn't say sort of the age of 14, yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
So obviously a lot of our viewers and all of your viewers know you went to airlines. So why did you choose airliners over military?
That is a good question. Because the military, I think in Germany is, you can have the option, but the assessment is incredibly difficult to get into.
Right.
And I know actually a few military pilots, and let's say sort of the sad side effect of being a military pilot is that they don't really fly as much, compared to the US Air Force. These boys, they fly probably 200 to 300 hours every year, but the German ones are sort of down to 50, maybe 80 hours a year, which is not a lot. It's more in the simulator kind of stuff. And and then it didn't really sort of strike my mind to actually become a military pilot, because I actually wanted to do more flying, like actual flying, So yeah, that's why.
Of course, yeah. So you have to talk us through your initial training. Like, how did it start, and where did you start?
It's a funny coincidence, as a lot of things are in aviation. I shouldn't have actually become a pilot, because my parents wanted me to become a dentist, and so I finished my school in Germany, and then you normally sort of do a year of social work. I was a paramedic for a year, and then I kind of had to choose what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, and then by pure chance, I got into university to study dentistry. But at the same day, I had the assessment to go to Lufthansa and take that initial test. But I cancelled on the test last minute, because getting this option to go to university for free in Germany, it's like a once in a lifetime chance. And my parents were I'm not going to say forcing me to do it, but they kind of really wanted to do it. And they said, "Joe, if you don't like it, then you might as well become a pilot." And so I went off to study 2 years dentistry, and in the meantime, I was actually sneaking out of university to go to a little flying school down in Austria. Literally just a little airfield. I think it's 750 feet long, and they had a little flying school with little Cessnas and whatnot. And that's I started getting some lessons there, and that sort of spiked the whole idea of actually pursuing my dream of becoming an airline pilot. And it's actually, since then, it's been quite a success story, because then my instructor actually, he sort of realized, okay, there's some talent. You really could do this, as a profession for the rest of your life. And then I quit university, and not really didn't make my parents very happy. But and then I went into a flying school in northern Germany, in Düsseldorf, and did all the theory in Düsseldorf, and then nearly all of my practical training in Vero Beach, Florida, at Flight Safety Academy, and that by far was one of that was just that time. I still look back to it and I think it was the best time I've had. Just flying around Florida. And
cool.
The funniest thing is that my instructor, he was literally the same age as I was, and but he had so much fun. And I don't know, it was 6 months of pure sunshine and flying around in little planes and just having a blast. And then when I finished, I came back. It was sort of 2008. I had to take one sort of major exam in Germany, theory-wise, obviously, and practical. I had to get my license converted from an American to a German one. And then once I've had that all, I was trying to apply to airlines, and I was, in bad luck because of the economy. It was just so bad at the time that no one was hiring. But me as a guy who has a very sort of, very optimistic and positive attitude, I had to take, just after my last check flight, I had to take another check flight to extend my single engine piston land license. And I went back to my old flying school in Austria. And so we did a flight, nothing special. And we went to a place which is very close to my parents. And we did a debriefing in a little, it's called the Propeller Restaurant. It's a little pub, nothing special, right? So we go in there, we discussed everything, and then literally a table next to me, there's a guy talking to his colleague saying, "Oh man, I don't know how we're going to deal with the summer. I desperately need a pilot. Who's going to fly the plane? I can't do it all by myself," and so forth and so on. And I hear that, with a table next to him, and I just went up to him and I said, "Mate, I've just finished my flying school. Would you be interested, in hiring me?" And he said, "That's fantastic." And I think 2 or 3 days later, I got my class rating, or started my class rating on the Pilatus Porter for skydiving, and to become a skydiving pilot. So I did that, and I remember the first time I actually flew the Pilatus Porter. I mean, it's not, let's say, not the most aesthetic airplane to look at, but
no,
flying is a complete overperformed. I mean, it's such a cool plane. But once because skydiving is, it's a lot of time. You have to go up as quickly as possible and then down as quickly as possible. So when the first time I actually did this, falling out of the sky procedure, really nose down, I said to myself, "Oh my God, Joe, what have you got yourself into? Why would you do that? You risk your life." And but then it's a thing that was really flying outside of my comfort zone at first.
Yeah.
But you get used to these things, right? And then so I was very happy to do that. I did that for 1 year, and I lived at my parents' place because it was so close to the little airport. And I've gained so much experience, because flying in a straight line, I'm not going to judge, but anyone can do that. But so starting and taking landings, that is where you really gain experience. And I did 32 loads a day on a weekend. I did so many touch and goes. It was so much fun. And then the funniest thing is, and that's again in aviation, you have to have a little bit of luck. The last day, more or less of that job, or more or less of the season, there was a guy sitting in this cramped Pilatus Porter with 10 other guys, and he was monitoring me throughout the entire day. And he was one of those guys where normally he jumps out, he lands, and then he has to pack his chute again. And so he skips maybe 2 or 3 flights in between, and then he gets back on again. But this guy was on every flight. So I knew he had girls who were packing his parachute. So I knew the guy was kind of sort of, he had some money and so on. And so at the end of the evening at the barbecue, he approaches me and says, "Hey, Joe, what are you going to do over the winter time?" So I had an option actually to go to Dubai and fly for Skydive Dubai. I declined that. I went there for an interview. It was all good and fun, but he then actually said I would. He's a chief pilot of a little executive company in Düsseldorf, where I actually was at flight school, if I would be interested in flying a King Air. And I said,
Wow.
mate, you do not have to ask me twice. I'm signing up. And that's what I did. And then literally a week later, I had my next job, and I was sitting in the type rating course for the King Air. And then I did some King Air flying, especially the executive aviation it's very unique. And, you have to do a lot of all the stuff you've learned in flight school, like flight planning and all the, the weather charts, reading weather charts and all that stuff. Airlines kind of do that for you, but in executive flying, you literally have to do it all by yourself. And we didn't have a flight attendant, so I was vacuum cleaning the airplane when we landed, and the passengers got out. That was my job. I was washing planes for a living for the time. But it was great. I mean, to gain experience, it was absolutely fantastic, because coming from the skydiving, it was more sort of VFR ATC, so you didn't really sort of request clearances and that kind of thing. But with the executive, it was all I've learned at flight school sort of kind of came to play in the executive area. And then she's not flying anymore now. She's got a kid, but she was with Air Berlin, and she sort of called me up one day and said, Joe, you are applying today at Air Berlin. I want you to send me all your details, and we'll, put your CV on top, and we'll try to get you in. I said, fantastic. That's what I did. So I sent my papers to Air Berlin. I'm not going to lie. A week later, they replied, said, Joe, can you come around for an assessment next month? I said, fantastic. And then the assessment definitely was challenging. It's comparable to the DLR test, like with Lufthansa. But, if you prepare well enough, and there are ways of preparing for these kind of things, and that's what I did. And as an advice for any listener here who is a flight student, I had actually had a chat with a psychologist before going into these interviews, and I kind of had a fear, that, he's going to ask me some weird thing, and then is he going to figure out something which is wrong about me or whatever. And the guy literally gave me the key advice to these assessments is when facing the psychologist, be honest. Just, speak out the truth. If you start lying and they ask you a question, they immediately realize, they'll ask you the same questions a couple of minutes later, and then you might sort of, you said a couple of minutes later, and then they realize, okay, he's been lying like half an hour ago. So, it's sometimes it's really harsh to be very truthful in those things. I mean, sometimes they ask you questions where you don't want to answer truthful, like if you're a well-organized person, and sometimes you're not, you're sloppy, that's just how you are. And but if you're honest and you tell them, I'm not like a perfectionist, but I'm trying to be, then that's an honest answer. And then so more or less that's what it got. Then I got through that, and I started my first job in an airline career, and I was very, very fortunate, because if I look back, I am very glad that I've had this, gained experience with the Porter, gained experience on the King Air, and got a piece of every kind of aviation industry there's out there. And a lot of my colleagues from flight school didn't get a job, and they were not doing anything for 2 years. If you work at, I'm not going to say McDonald's or whatever, but if you don't use your time wisely and don't do anything aviation related, airlines will realize that, or see that on your CV, and it doesn't good. You might as well be a ramp agent. That is aviation related enough, and they will pick up on that and say that's great. So I'm happy I've done that. And they, in the final interview, they realized that I was, putting a lot of effort into, maintaining a job and being in the industry. And so I was happy. It all somehow karma paid back on that day when I got the job with Air Berlin. Yeah. So that's how I got into the airline industry, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we move into your initial training, so was it your best friend? If your best friend didn't push you in that direction, would you have went airliners, or would you have stuck to what you were currently doing?
The thing is that this best friend of mine, we were actually at flight school together. So we both had, the whole flight school was kind of sort of laid out to become an airline pilot. None of them was sitting there to say, okay, I'm going to become a seaplane pilot or something else. I mean, that is just, I think, sort of they brainstorm you that much. And especially all the courses you take are so ATPL, air transport pilot license oriented, that they don't really give you another option, or you don't really see the other options, that you could become. I know a good friend of mine is a seaplane pilot, and he's doing it's a fantastic job. But yeah, she not that she forced me into it, or I mean, we just had the same goal, and I'm very very happy that she gave me that call that day, and that everything paid out in the end. And to be fair, in aviation, sometimes a bit of as they call it, vitamin B does help, knowing someone here and there. Yeah. I'm not saying that she, guaranteed me the job. I still had to go through all the assessments like everyone else had to do, but she was because it was an internal message at first saying that we are looking for pilots, I kind of had a bit of a head start than anyone else because I sent in the CV before they were actually hiring people from the outside. So, yeah, but that's just sometimes you have to have a bit of luck.
I think that's true in any case, in any walks of life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But, so let's talk about, I'm guessing it's your first love, the A320. Can you talk us through your initial training, and was it daunting coming from, lighter aircraft?
Absolutely. The funniest thing was when I got the job with Airliners, they asked me if I wanted to go on the 737 or the A320. I mean, that itself is, no airline does that. They actually option that you have to choose from. But so I said, I definitely have to go to 737, because the funny thing is I was so brainwashed by an instructor who said, why would I ever want to fly an Airbus? Because because of the electronic checklist, he said, why should I trust a plane that has a failure and then gives me a checklist to do so with an electronic checklist? It doesn't make any sense. He is so stuck. He said, paper checklist, that's the one and only. And so I was and also this whole fly-by-wire stuff, and I said, oh my God. Nevertheless, Evelyn then I said 737, and I was and I did the MCC, what's it called, the multi-cockpit crew, oh God, I've forgotten the name for it. So it's like this CRM training I did on the 737 simulator. And so I was kind of fixed to Boeing. Nevertheless, Evelyn calls and says, oh, Joe, no, we need more pilots on the A320. And I said, oh my God, no. I was so frustrated, and I said, this is going to be the worst ever. But and then I read into it, and then when the training started on the type rating, and we did most of our type rating in Switzerland with Swiss aviation training. Okay. They sort of outsourced, some of the training into Switzerland. It was fantastic. Oh my word. At first I was very skeptical, I admit, because I have to admit, it is a very complex plane. It is very electronic. There's a lot of things, which are a bit sort of, I'm not getting into that so much, but nevertheless, it was funny when we were there, and we had shared flats with other pilots and who've gone through 737 training. And I remember when we in the evenings, these Boeing pilots just made so much fun of us. Okay, you've been playing on your Atari all day today, it was hilarious, and kind of we couldn't really backfire with anything. It's not we had against them. So, but the training itself was it was really good, and I'm thankful that we've done it in Switzerland, because they're really sort of by the book, and we really got a good training there. And then I remember when we came out of the aviation training there, and we had to do our first flight. Oh my God. I remember we had to go to a place, Rostock, in northern part of Germany. Oh, was it Rostock? Yeah, I think it was Rostock. Some, it's one of these, an airport. It's like an ex-military airbase. And so we just used that airfield to do some traffic patterns. And I remember it was 6 pilots, I think it was, 7, I think it was 7 pilots times 5 traffic patterns. That was 35 touch and goes in an A320. and I remember the day we got there, it was so funny. I thought, okay, Airliners going to plan and give us the oldest, crappiest plane they have, But they just took any plane which was scheduled. We had a brand new A320.
Oh, really?
And we were taking it around. If you do your first landings, and especially the captain has no real control, because he can't really see inputs, because it's, the side stick doesn't give force feedback to the captain's side stick. So, I admit, okay, the first one was good. Remember the first one landing was good, but a few of those 5, I really put it down. But it was fun. It's a learning curve. You have to learn and you gain experience. And, then I went through the supervision phase. Also really cool was that some of my colleagues, I think I was the only one, most of my colleagues went to Air Berlin. I did the supervision with Air Berlin, and I, funny enough, did it with LTU, which was a company previous to Air Berlin, and then Air Berlin actually bought LTU, and I was, but the whole supervision training was with these really, really experienced LTU pilots, which were, I mean, the knowledge they have passed on to you was just mind blowing. You know, they were so incredibly helpful, and you know, I was a total newbie. I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, because at that point, the plane is literally flying you, because it's such it's an information overload, and you can't really you have to process everything. And the thing I did, I remember, which helped me a lot, was I did a lot of like voice recordings to myself. I've recorded stuff. Sometimes I still listen to them, and they're like 10 years old now. And I've recorded things I've learned, just to process them a little better and to get a better understanding for many things. And that's one of those, an advice I got from one of these captains. And I'm thankful for it. It was so cool. And, and then in the end, everything worked out fine. And I was based so my supervision training was in, Düsseldorf, and that was like 3 months. And then I, was based in Stuttgart, which was, it's a normal little airport, flying to Mallorca, I don't know, 52 times a year. And then, you know, the first year is really where it counts, where you have to just, you know, I was taking any flight they gave to me. I haven't had one sick day in my first year, because I was having so much fun. And, that's my beginning of the airline career with Air Berlin.
Awesome. Yep. So just talking about a bit more about the A320, what was the cockpit like? Was it all glass cockpit, or was there analog gauges in there?
Yeah, we had a few of them, really, really old ones, which had a few analog instruments, but in general, it's all glass cockpit. I mean, analog standby instruments, that's what we've had. But no, in general, it was all glass cockpit. And I mean, comparing to the plane I fly now, the Airbus A320 is, I think, one of the most spacious cockpit out there, and it's incredible. It's a plane to get really old on. I mean, for like senior pilot, it's great because you have so much space. I mean, that table. I mean, at first I thought, when am I ever going to use this table? What's it good for, anyways? I mean, now I have to admit, I really miss it, because that table is so convenient for, you know, doing fuel checks or anything, like having your meal on that table. It's just great.
And is that exclusive to Airbus, or do Boeings now do that?
Oh, no. No, I think Boeing, I actually seen there was in type rating for the 747. I think I saw a little in the computer-based training. They had a little video where they said, the yoke, an airplane is made for flying. A cockpit is laid out for flying and not to have to have your meals in it. It was something like it was such like a unintended, you know, it's against Airbus. No, but in general, Airbus is very, it's reliable. All right. I mean, I've never had any serious malfunction with it, but there's a few things. Sometimes you do have, I don't know, on the ECAM, it shows some kind of failure on ground. Uh-huh. And sometimes you couldn't get rid of it. You know, you pulled circuit breakers, you did this and that, and you called maintenance, and, you know, you just couldn't get rid of it. And then at one point, the guy from maintenance just said, all right, shut it all down. Literally, just turn the whole airplane off and just more or less restart it. Like you would restart a computer. Oh, really? And then the failure it was gone, you know. And I thought, oh my God, I think it didn't really, I mean, reliability, okay, but apparently that's one of the things you cannot do with the 747, or generally with Boeing. You can turn it off and, you know, off and on again, and the failure won't have disappeared. But on the Airbus, that's quite sort of a common thing to do.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. And we will be talking about the 747 a bit later on. But can you tell us what destinations and routes you used to fly on the A320?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anything within Europe. I mean, I think I've counted it at one point, and I did in the 8 years of flying with Air Berlin. I think I've seen up to 60 destinations. The ones I really, really preferred flying to was definitely the Greece islands. Going to Greece was, you know, I like the airfield. I mean, Airbus is very very automated, and there's a lot of so much, you get all the helps, all the bits and bobs which really help you make flying incredibly easy. But it's not necessarily a plane to built to do a lot of manual flying. You can, I'm not saying you can't, but it was cool to sort of see, fly visual approaches with the A320, which that's what I love. And that's what I went to work for. I just wanted to do visual approaches because that sort of puts you into a little Cessna, and you just do it with 210 passengers behind you. I thought it was fantastic. So the Greek islands, you had, because some of them, they had, first of all, they can't afford an ILS or a VOR approach. So they had some kind of NDB or whatever to pinpoint that you could actually get to the airport. And then you did your, visual pattern, and then sort of self-created your own approach. And that was really cool. And I really liked that. And then obviously the ones which were more challenging, but also a lot of fun, were the Canary Islands. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Any island you fly to, any runway there is completely built in the wrong direction, because there's not a single airport in the Canary Islands which hasn't got crosswind. They all have crosswinds. You fly in there and it's a minimum of 50 to 60 degrees crosswind and 20 knots and upwards, and sometimes you actually reach the limits because you have crosswind limitations. But those are the approaches I go to work for, because flying an ILS with calm winds is, I'm not going to say boring, but it's there's no real challenge in it. And when you fly, you get shaken back and forth on these crosswind approaches, especially on the Canary Islands. That was so cool, and I could do that all day long. And so those are the days I really loved at work. Yeah.
So how do you feel about, coming from flying light airplanes to having, like you say, like 100 odd people in the back and also crew on? How did you take that?
It's funny. I think, when you start off in a little Cessna, the first 10, maybe 30 to 40 hours is where you really a lot of experience, and you kind of process what you've learned. And it's the same with the Airbus. Then, the plane is just a bit bigger, but in the end, the physics haven't changed. It's still an airplane. And, but in terms of the passengers, funny enough, I never really thought a lot about my passengers, because I more thought about the plane itself. I didn't want to hurt or damage the plane in any ways. It sounds a bit strange when I say that, but I kind of build up a little relationship with the plane every time I take off and land with it, because it is also my life, which, the plane, my life depends on that plane. I'm taking it up there, so I might as well have to bring it down and make it as safe as possible. And so I kind of blended out that I had 200 odd passengers sitting behind me. I had, in terms of that, I actually had a lot of fun with passengers, because we did all sorts of cool stuff. I remember one of the flights where we were delayed for hours and hours because French airspace was on strike or whatever. And then, we invited passengers. We knew we're going to take off in the next 3 hours at one point. And then we just made an announcement via the PA. If anyone is interested to come by and have a look at the cockpit, we'll give you a bit of a tour. And people just loved doing that. And it was so cool to, motivate them a little bit, show them what we're doing, and, sort of interacting with these people. And I think that's the only point I really realized, that I have passengers. But besides that, it was me, the captain, and the captain, me, and the plane. And no, I didn't really think of much. But in terms of little planes and small little Cessnas compared to Airbus, in the end, if you apply power, it'll go up. If you decrease power, it'll descend. It is no big difference. And So
how did the A320 handle? Did it feel heavy on the stick?
The side stick doesn't really give you a lot of feedback. So I like to say sometimes the less is more on the Airbus. If you fly down ILS and you get shaken back and forth, and the plane somehow always finds back to its flight path. It is a flight path guided plane, it's so difficult to explain, but nevertheless, in terms of handling, I remember sometimes reaching the limit of the plane. In terms of like crosswind, sometimes, let's say you had a crosswind coming from the right, you use the side stick to counteract. You put in some right aileron to sort of balance the plane out, to have level wings. And sometimes I remember the wind was so strong that I was at max deflection going all to the right, and the plane still kept tilting to the left. And that it's not, I'm not going to say a bad plane to fly in crosswinds. It's maybe Boeing in that terms is a little bit better. But and sometimes, it's sort of, you don't get a lot of response from the plane what you're doing. That in terms of Boeing, it's much better. It's much better because you really have a feel of what you're doing. And the biggest difference, I think, is the trim, that you don't really know what it's doing. So, and the same is with the autothrottle. You have the autothrottle, the autothrust. Oh, God, I'm getting mixed up already. The autothrust is you don't see any movement of, if it applies power, if it decreases power, it's always at the same spot. And as a pilot, you kind of need that feedback of the plane, what it's doing. And that was something, I got used to it, and you actually got really lazy because you didn't really think about it that much anymore. But then converting over to the Boeing, it is, oh God, people are going to hate me for that. I feel a little more as a pilot now because I have more interaction with the plane, and it is more responsive, and I get this force feedback, which I appreciate after all. But in general, I have nothing against Airbus, and I'm not going to say it's either one of them is better. But I really, really loved flying the A320. It is a fantastic plane, and it was way, way ahead than Boeing when it was first brought out in 1982, I think it was. And until today, it is still really advanced. Obviously, other planes are now a bit more modern, but the A320, if you don't change anything with it, it'll last for the next 40 years at least, because it's the system they've put in place. It's incredibly reliable. It's so easy to understand, and it'll just keep on going.
So a real workhorse, isn't it?
Totally. I'm not surprised why so many airlines use it. It is. Okay, the 737 is the one which is sold a little more often, but some of the 737s are so old that because they're all analog, you can't use them as much as, maybe they're just outdated. But if you can fly an Airbus A320 from the 1980s until today, there's limits to everything, but still, it hasn't changed. It still looks exactly the same from the interior, and that's just what I think about Airbus. That very intuitive thinking of these engineers in the 80s is still adaptable, or still used until today, and that to me makes Airbus so special.
Absolutely. So how long did you spend on the A320, and can you tell us where you went after this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the A320, I started with Air Berlin in 2010, and I did my last flight on the A320 on the 27th, I think, or 21st of October 2018. So 8 years, and I don't regret any day. I've been working for Air Berlin. I had the time of my life with that company. We had so much fun. We've been all to these funny places. Mallorca was more or less our second home. We had so incredible nice layovers. And I've I've met incredible people there. I've gained so much experience. We had so much fun with the flight attendants. Okay, that sounds a bit odd, but no, we just really had a good connection with all these people. And it was an incredible team effort, everything we've done. Especially, I remember the last day when the company actually shut down. It was just so emotional. We were sitting there at Munich airport, the last flight going from Munich to Berlin, and everyone was there, and everyone was crying their hearts out, and then when the plane last took off, but then we celebrated in old school Air Berlin style. We were flooring it out. The crew briefing area where we had that party in Munich, we completely trashed it. We trashed it, but it was so cool. And I still have a few friends there, and I'm so happy to hear that most of them have, got a job after that. And that to me is also really important, that these colleagues of mine, continue working as pilots, and also the flight attendants. Absolutely. And it's good to see where their careers have, headed. And and I myself consider myself as very, very lucky to have got the job on the plane I always wanted to fly, the 747, and it is yeah, it's been a bit of a success story, except for those 5 months I was unemployed. But no, now it's even better than what I've had before. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're a very lucky man to fly the Queen of the Skies. So let's talk a bit about the 747. Can you talk about your initial training? Like, was it different, like coming from the Airbus?
Absolutely. I remember when, when I had to prepare for the assessment, I didn't want anything to go wrong at the assessment, so I prepared a lot in advance. I took 4 hours in the 747 sim in Frankfurt to really prepare, because I was so worried that might have forgotten how to trim, because it's been 8 years since I've flown a plane with a manual trim. And, obviously the characteristics are a bit different. She's much heavier than everything else I've flown so far. And that training was incredible. I remember the guy who was doing the training in the simulator just to get some experience for the screening. He was a 757 pilot, and he just said, Joe, there's no big difference between the 7.5 and the 7.4. It just has a few engines more, but in general, he gave me such cool advice, like pitch and power settings and all that kind of stuff, and it was so helpful. Which then I put into the screening when I was at Cargolux for the screening. And okay, I'm not going to sounds a bit arrogant, but I completely nailed that assessment, because my chief, actually funny enough, the chief pilot was the guy who did the screening, and his deputy is sitting behind me, and I had so much fun. And I'm sure not many people can say that they have fun during a very, very stressful time. You have a window of 45 minutes to prove, okay, I am the guy you want to hire. I can really fly this plane. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened, and then it was just a really cool experience. And I think back to this, smiling actually. And then, the initial training on the 747, complete, fire hose to the mouth and full on such an overload of information. It was complete, everything was different to what I've learned from the A320. Uh-huh. The good thing is about Boeing, which I immediately realized, the books in terms of manuals. You have countless manuals. They were much better organized than the ones in Airbus. Sorry, Airbus, you have to step up your game when it comes to that. But no, I had an incredible TKI, theoretical knowledge instructor. She was, she knows the plane in and out. She was such a cool lady. She's actually just getting her upgrade, so I can't wait to fly with her. Again, the training, we were very lucky. We're a tiny little course. We were only 4 of us. The courses behind and ahead of us were like 16 pilots, so we're very lucky to be such a tiny course. And the cool thing is, a lot of our instructors had where I don't want to check, so they had to, there was always another instructor in the room checking if the other instructor was doing a good job. The same was in the sim. Sometimes we sat in the sim with 3 other instructors. Like, one was doing the actual training, there was a guy being checked, the other being checking the others. It was absolutely crazy. But we got so much input from these pilots, and there was so much. So many eyes monitoring us, what we were doing. But it was just, everyone was trying to be incredibly helpful. And it's been a very, very steep learning curve from day one, more or less. And it was great. I love, getting into new books and reading into stuff. And you do, Boeing is not so much different. The fuel system is more or less the same that it is on the Airbus, things that there's a few things engineers can't differ from or can't change, like when they build an airplane. So they're incredibly redundant and all that kind of stuff. And so I could see a few things which are relatable to Airbus. And it helped a lot that, especially with this old YouTube stuff and all the videos I've done, a lot of that came to play because I knew the systems fairly well, and I could just adapt that to the 747. And the training was cool. And then obviously when you're done with your final, I think, what's it called? The release to, I don't remember. It's a check flight you have to take in the simulator, which releases you to go out on the actual plane. And then when I did my first, oh my word, I was, oh God, I was so incredibly. I took a -8, right? I had only minimum training on the 747-8 in the sim, because you do most of the training on the 400. And I got onto the -8, and this instructor, he was such a nice guy. And we were in a large crew. It was from Luxembourg to LA. I mean, lucky me flying to LA the first flight. It was absolutely fantastic. But I remember when we took off, I mean, there's a little vent you have in the jumbo, which sort of, you can have it sort of facing in your face that you get some cool air. Right. I put that vent onto the yoke. I had so sweaty hands. I was so incredibly nervous. And that vent was kind of drying the sweat on the yoke. It was absolutely hilarious. So I took off, and I remember, I was expecting like a lot of rattling noises going on and nothing. It was so quiet. And especially the -8, it's actually, you can't hear the turbines or the engines as much as you can on the 400. Nevertheless, we take off, and I remember that so vividly, is that the plane rotates, and you hear that little click, like it. And I realized in that moment the auto brake system disengages, goes to disarm, and it turns off the auto brake system, and it's a little mechanical switch, and it just goes click as soon as the landing gear, as soon as the struts leave the ground, and it sort of disconnects. And it was so funny that I was expecting all sorts of weird noises and sounds going off, and it wasn't. It was dead silent in the cockpit, and then just click, and then okay, let's head to LA. It was so cool. And then the flight itself. I mean, I could speak hours about that flight. I mean, my instructor, he gave me a chance. That to me is very, very important, especially if anyone of the listeners is an instructor. Give your student the chance to enjoy his first flight, because to me, that was a life-changing thing. I mean, flying the 747 the first time is, you don't want to, I mean, your head's all over this place, you're thinking about so many things, and you don't want to be, I'm not going to say interrupted, but you don't want to get, tons of questions on your first flight about systems and all that kind of stuff, because you have to let your student, have some fun and enjoy his first flight, because it's the thing I will always look back to. And if you would have asked me tons of questions, it probably would have ruined my flight, but it didn't. And so we just had an amazing time. The layover, I think it was a 4-day layover in LA. I mean, what more can I ask? I mean, so we spent 4 days in the sun. Yeah, absolutely. And we went to In-N-Out Burgers, saw the planes coming in, and all that kind of stuff. And it was really cool. Yeah, I really loved it.
Yeah, I think I followed you on Instagram, where I was like watching your story, and it just looked absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure a proud moment for yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant. So, why did you decide to go cargo rather than passenger?
It's That's a good question. Okay, I can let you into a little bit of a story there. I admit that I applied to numerous airlines, right? I mean, that's just what you did. Company shut down, and I kind of had to get a new job. And one airline which was fairly high up on the list, I can't mention its name, but all of my colleagues went to that airline. I mean, same base, same airplane. Let's be honest. No much change in the comfort zone, right? I would have stayed where I would have been, and everything would have been fine. Now, coming back later to this whole YouTube stuff, it was for a passenger airline, obviously. I was in the interview, went fantastically well. All my colleagues passed before me, all my colleagues passed after me, and I, strangely enough, was the only guy to not get that job. And I figured out in the aftermath what really happened. The guy hated me for what I was doing on YouTube, and so on and so forth. Okay. I'm not going to blame him, but the funny thing is that the company I work for now, they were actually really happy about that I did this Captain Joe stuff. They loved it, and I'm not saying that there was a reason why they hired me. I mean, I had to go through the assessment like everyone else, and I had to prove that I'm good enough to fly for this airline. And I don't know. I'm not going to say I don't care about passengers. It's more, I wanted to fly, and if it's flying, I don't know how many passengers can you fit in a 747, something like 400 or whatever. Yeah, sure. I a pilot by heart. I do it because I love it for the sake of flying. And if I take horses or passengers, I don't care, because I'm a very sort of, well, emotional is a wrong word. I'm not an emotional pilot. I like the feel of it. I do it because I like the feeling of taking off and landing. And so I don't really matter what I take around. And so cargo, to me, actually now, I think I don't want to fly passengers anymore. It's just so much
no hassle for
relaxed.
you.
No, I mean, you didn't really have that much hassle with the passengers in the first place when I was with Air Berlin. I mean, I'm very thankful for all the flight attendants who've been protecting us pilots from, complaining passengers. But nowadays with cargo, the entire operation, it's just so easygoing. It's just, there's no stress. There's no, we have to be, you do have to be on time, obviously, at one point, but it's not like, every second counts. And as soon as you don't take off in the next 5 minutes, you've got complaining passengers banging at your cockpit door. It's not like that. And cargo operation is very, unique, and it's demanding at the same time. It's different in terms of scheduling, and we fly. A lot of people say we fly primarily through the night. I don't think that way. Yes, maybe I have a little bit more night flights than I had in the past, but in general, the operation is similar, but it is just from a pilot's perspective, it's so much more relaxed. So much more relaxed.
Yeah, of course. So is there a difference for briefing like a flight, or is it like simpler, more difficult? How does that work?
No. It's in terms of briefing wise, what we do in the briefing area at the company it's exactly the same as we did with passengers. It's obviously without flight attendants. The flight attendants briefing was always very short. You kind of told them, okay, we're expecting some turbulence here and there. You might want to consider, filling the service to another time when we're of the flight. But obviously that is not there anymore. But briefing wise, it is exactly the same. You go through the NOTAMs, the notice to airmen. You go through the Met charts, the weather charts. You look for alternates. You go en route alternates. You do the exact same thing as you do as a passenger pilot. But interesting enough, when you get on board, there's a bit of a change, because you speak a lot to the load master, so the guy who actually is in charge of loading the plane. And you have to thoroughly go through the list of cargo you are transporting, because you kind of want to review if you have any dangerous goods on board. You then want to do a main deck check, go into the cargo compartment and really have a look at all these dangerous goods, if they, damaged in any way or strapped securely and all that kind of thing. Just to be aware, you have to kind of be aware of what you transport. And some of the cargo we fly, holy cow. It's just, you would never even think that they would put that on a plane. It's just incredible.
Can you share some things you've actually carried? That might be interesting for you.
Well, there's the coolest definitely, which is coming up very soon. I can say that is, I think it's been in the media already, is that Cargolux is transporting 2 beluga whales from China to Iceland. Just picture that. Putting a whale on a plane. It's not just going to be lying around and just strapped it down to a pallet. Yeah. Obviously, it has to have a tank it's not going to swim. No. It's just incredible, So these kind of things are, okay, we have transported race cars. I did the Formula One charter once from Sao Paulo to, where did we fly to? Lagos, Nigeria, and then fuel stop in Nigeria, and then we went over to Abu Dhabi to take the cars to the Formula One. Okay, I actually had the expectation we're going to see all these Formula One cars. You don't really see the cars because they're covered in a huge box. But it's so cool just to get on board, and you got like Williams, and you got Ferrari, and you got McLaren, and all these boxes, and oh my God, this cargo you're transporting is worth millions of euros.
So you better fly well.
And definitely have a good soft landing. The coolest thing we've had in terms of, I like a lot. I'm a music guy, and my parents kind of brought me up with the Beatles. And I had a really cool flight going to Narita, Japan. And there was a guy It's so funny. There's a guy we had to pick up as a passenger. Sometimes we do have passengers. We have like 8 sort of business class seats up in the upper deck of the 747. And so this guy comes up and says, "Oh, I'm the passenger." And he was carrying a large suitcase, but a very long one. And it said nothing on it, but he was really sort of grabbing onto it. And we didn't really question what it was, nevertheless. So we get onto the plane, and he didn't say what his job was. He didn't mention anything of that. We got onto the plane, and the entire cargo area was completely packed with stage equipment of Paul McCartney. And I completely lost it. Oh my God. I mean, I really look up to this guy. I mean, he's a Beatle, right? I mean, picture that. So,
doesn't get killed on that, does it?
Yeah, and that guy then, he was up in the upper deck, and he had this suitcase. And obviously at one point I kind of had to ask what he was carrying around. And it was Paul's guitar, and that just, I mean, he didn't open it, but I was wanting him to open it, have a string at it. But it was just, and it was just, this was so cool. And I am, this makes this job incredibly interesting, because sometimes, of course, you just fly boxes from A to B. There's no secret about it. But, getting a chance to fly the beluga whales, Hollywood equipment, race cars, Porsches, test vehicles. I mean, the list is absolutely endless, what we carry around. And that kind of makes you special as a pilot, because you brought something from A to B, but it... Oh, hang on, is that room service? I'm sorry if I just... Oh, hang on, mate. Hang on. Oh, is it a fire drill? Oh, for crying out loud, you can't be serious. Right, I think you just have to pause it real quick. I'm sorry.
No worries, Joe.
Okay, that was very spontaneous. There goes off the fire drill in my hotel.
I've never had that in an interview before.
Yeah, there you go. That's the first.
That's the first for me.
What I was saying is that it makes you, sort of kind of makes you special as a pilot. Is you bring stuff from A to B, and you kind of had a part in this whole, logistics and in the whole role of accomplishing projects, or bringing race cars to racetracks and that kind of thing. I mean, we've had race horses on board, and you have the grooms, the groom who's actually looking out for the horse during the flight. I mean, the stories these guys can tell are just incredible, and that's, I think, what I live for. It's the stories. Every package we fly from A to B has something to tell, and that is just, to me, very precious and important, and it gives your job more of a sense, of what you're doing, and just being a little part of it all. I mean, the whole chain. So it's I really like it. Come on, is it ringing off again? Oh, Mike, this is just such a disappointment. I think they're just having I read some information about having a fire drill. It's just going to go off for half an hour now. Okay, well, Mike, then I think what we'll do is I will just call reception, ask them how long this procedure is going for. I know it's just a test drill, but we just then call back, like sort of in 20 minutes. I know it's a bit disruptive now, but that thing, it just went on and on and on. But they just cut it out. They said it stops at 5:30. So it was just a test, and I called in guest services, and they said it's going on for half an hour or so. But it's over now. It's all good.
Perfect. Good. Okay, so Joe, can you talk us through the 747 cockpit? I mean, it looks very roomy, but how does it feel like piloting it?
It's so funny that you say roomy, because it's not. It's so funny. If you look at the 747, she is huge. I mean, every time I step in front of or get out of the bus, which takes us to the airplane, I am completely mesmerized by its size. But funny enough, when you go up the staircase and you come into the upper deck, the cockpit is really, really small. I mean, once you're actually situated in your seat, the overhead panel is very close to your head, and everything is sort of crammed into it. And it's funny, because you would think it's that huge of a massive plane, and why is the cockpit so small? But no, in general, the layout of the Boeing 747 is fairly similar similar to what I've experienced on the Airbus. I mean, on the overhead panel, you have all the systems which aren't as, much used, obviously, during flying. You have your fuel panel, you have your fire extinguisher panel, you have all these panels which kind of sort of are less used during normal regular flying. But in general, yes, you have a huge yoke in between your legs. That is probably the biggest difference. And but obviously glass cockpit all around. And in general, the layout is also very, it is easy to understand. I mean, if you would take a passenger and explain sort of where everything is, it does make sense how they've laid it out. And it's a comfortable, snoozy little cockpit. It's from my taste, it's just an inch too small. But no, you get used to it. It's fine. Yeah.
So obviously there's the Boeing versus Airbus debate. Which do you prefer, the side control on the Airbus or the yoke on the Boeings?
In terms of that, I always like to refer a plane, you as a pilot have to fly a plane like a Cessna, or it should feel like a little Cessna, because that's what you start off with, right? And an Airbus A320 or Airbus in general with the side stick can't really give you that feeling. First of all, you don't have the force feedback of the side stick, what the plane is actually doing. That in many ways, I'm not saying it's uncomfortable or dangerous in any ways. It's just, if you're in full IFR, you kind of need a bit of a feedback from your yoke or from your input into the plane of what you're doing, because that's what you also, besides relying on your instruments primarily, you kind of also rely a little bit on the feel, maybe 5% in all, but still. But on the 747, it is, I personally think, and I said that before, you do feel a little more as a pilot having more control over the plane, because she is incredibly responsive. So, it's funny if you turn like to, a 25-degree bank or something, you apply in the pressure and you kind of have to hold it at first. On the Airbus, you literally, if you wanted a 25-degree bank, you put the side stick, looked at the bank indicator, you turned it to the left, and then you let go of the side stick, and that was it. And then the plane just maintained that flight attitude until you applied some pressure into the other direction. But for the Boeing, if I tilt it to the left, it will initially do the turn, but if I let go of the control, it will then roll out to get wings level again. And that is the key difference between the planes, is that the Boeing is more of a Cessna, because if I apply pressure on a yoke on a Cessna, it will return back to its original flight path, and compared to the Airbus, it won't. And those are sort of the major differences. Both of them are safe, but I'm not saying anything is better or worse, but it's just you have a bit of more, you're more in tune with your plane on the Boeing. That's, I think, is sort of the biggest difference between the Airbus,
So how long have you been on the 747, and what are your future plans? Do you intend to carry on the jet?
Yeah, well, I feel I haven't been on it too long enough. I've only been on it a year now. I mean, it'll be a year in March. Flying it, actually, my first flight was in June, so I've only been actually a half year on it. Yeah. What is the future of it? I mean, it's so funny. When I started it, I heard all these rumors that that Boeing is going to shut down the 747 project or program, because there is no real need anymore for 4-engine jet aircraft, because nowadays you can, if you look at an A350, I mean, the ETOPS certification that got, it can fly around the world with one engine. It's just, nowadays you don't need, the 4-engine era has just come, or is slowly coming to an end. Yeah. And, there are discussions, the key factor of the 747, why it is so good, especially in the cargo area, is because of the nose cargo door. That is the key essence to the whole plane, is that door, because in the future, when it's going to be retired, let's say 10, 15 years. I will be flying it for a couple of more years, that's for sure. But somehow engineers have to come up with an idea to replace the nose cargo door, because then you won't be able to transport, 50-meter long, 100-ton heavy drill, because you can't load it onto the plane anymore. Of course, you have the Antonovs, you have the Galaxy, but the Galaxy is also retiring at one point. She's so incredibly old, and which is, funny enough, the biggest competitor of Boeing many, many years back, but that's a whole other story. But so they will have to come at the swingtail. I highly doubted that will come back. I know, is it? Hang on. Airbus Beluga is no, it's not a swingtail. It's also nose cargo. So that's not really an option either. So I don't know. We'll see what the future brings. But I'm sure the next 10 years are secure. That I'll definitely fly the 747 for the next. That's for sure. Yeah,
lucky man. And maybe it'll be interesting to see if the A380 is maybe turned into a cargo plane. I don't know if it's possible, but it certainly has a size.
I highly, highly doubt it, because the interesting fact about the 747 is, and I'm not sure if many of my listeners actually know that, it was built to be a cargo plane. That is the interesting fact. A lot of people think that it's actually a passenger plane, but that was not the whole idea. Okay, let's bring back to the story with the Galaxy. Don't nail me down on dates, but when the whole project or the program of the 747 started, because the US Air Force was looking for a cargo plane to transport these standardized containers, which they have on lorries, which they have on like shipping containers, right? Yeah. So that was the measurement or the requirement the US Air Force laid out. They said, we want a plane which can fit this container. So a lot of airlines applied, and Boeing came up with the 747 program, and that's the reason why the cockpit is above on the upper deck, so you could fit a nose cargo door in the first place, and that you could fit that container. At the same time, Lockheed was a rival, or also presenting a program, which is the Galaxy, and the US Air Force went with the Galaxy, and then the 747 of Boeing was left over with their project, and no one was interested in it anymore. Then Juan Trippe, the CEO from Pan Am at the time, Boeing sort of had a very close relationship with him, because he has bought countless planes beforehand, and he said, well, why not put an upper deck, put the first class into the upper deck, because Joe Sutter, the guy who's actually the godfather of the 747, he actually had intended to have the upper deck as a crew rest. And Juan Trippe said, oh, no, we're not having that. No. We're definitely going to have an upper class, it's like you above the economy class, more or less. And that was the key selling point. And that literally saved the 747 project because of Juan Trippe's idea. And then, they've been selling it off to Lufthansa and all these other companies. And it was great. And then I think a couple of years back, they then came back to the original program and then said, okay, we're also going to introduce a cargo plane. And that's how it all, reverted back to the old plans and put the nose cargo in place. And so it has, multiple options to use it. So it's great for passenger and it's great for cargo. And that I personally think makes it so incredibly unique. And I'm so thankful that I could fly it.
Yeah, apart from the Concorde, I would say it's probably the best looking airliner out there.
It sure is. It's just different. Nowadays, not to sound like degrading to any airplanes out there, it's a long pipe with wings and a stabilizer at the back, and they don't have real shape anymore. I think the A350 does look very stylish too, and the 787, they're all getting more aerodynamic and whatnot, but none of them has this unique hump. You will recognize the 747 miles away. You can see her coming. If she's flying alongside of you, you will immediately recognize it's a 747 because of the hump. And that, to me, makes her so special.
And before we move on to chat about, obviously, YouTube, what mark of the 747 do you fly, and what's the difference? Is it just engines, or is it avionics as well?
Oh yeah, there's a few differences. We have a few ERFs, sort of the extended range freighters, which have different engines. A lot of them have the old Pratt and Whitneys. My God, they sound amazing. They have the coolest sound. Really, I mean, once you flip that switch, this engine just sort of, there's a roar to it. It's just really cool. We have the 400s, the standard 400s. Most of them come with the Rolls-Royce engines, and we have the Dash 8, obviously, which is the more modern one, which comes with the Gen X engines, the General Electrics. They're all more or less the same. The Dash 8 is a little bit more powerful. Funny enough, it is when you're in the cockpit and take off, you can barely hear the engines because they're so quiet, but you can feel the little bit of, the extra part of thrust it has. But in terms of cockpit layout, it's exactly the same. For the biggest difference on the Dash 8 is obviously the electronic checklist. So everything is electronically. You don't use the quick reference handbook anymore as much, or you don't have a paper checklist anymore. And in terms of flying wise, the Dash 8 is a little more unstable than the 400. The 400 really gives you that, wow, this is a heavy as aircraft, and you can really feel, you get a presence of this. It tells you kind of, I'm a heavy plane, and you can really feel it on the yoke. The thing is, on the Dash 8, there's a few things like the descent rate is, it needs more, like you have to start the descent with the Dash 8 a little earlier than you would have had to do with the 400, because she's more of a glider. Right. No, I mean, still, but the wing is just more sensitive, and, it's with a little sort of swept back and those what they call the winglets, which are sort of integrated into the wing itself. It does, and it is a little more sort of unstable on the last sort of 100, 200 feet on when you come in for landing. But that, that's what the book says. It says I haven't really felt it as much. I remember on descent planning that you use the speed brakes more often to really create excessive drag to actually get her down than you would rather do on the 400. I don't use the speed brakes as much on the 400s as I would have used on the Dash 8. But that's just how it is. But on the other hand, the Dash 8 has much more sort of really cool features, showing you if you're too high on your descent profile or if you're too low. Obviously the 400 does that as well, but the Dash 8 has a few more features which sort of really help you to, get back on profile. But besides that, they are more or less the same. More or less, yeah.
Yeah, and before we move on, have you seen the recent news that British Airways are going to do an old BOAC livery on their 747?
Well, they better do. That's amazing.
It looks absolutely that's incredible.
Cool. That's cool. I must say, the livery of British Airways itself, I've always been very fond of it. The one which I really thought was incredibly cool, besides all these special ones, they had one which was for the Olympics, was an A320, I think, and they had golden feathers and everything. It was sort of gold. It was so unique and different to all others, and I thought that was cool, sort of, to show that we have the Olympics and being proud to be British and that kind of thing. But no, it was really nice, and there's good liveries out there. British Airways is one of them I kind of like, and it's cool if they bring out the BOAC. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, that will be pretty special. But
that'll be special for all the spotters. I can promise you that.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of them out there, isn't there? But we're certainly wishing you all the best for your future career on the 747.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we need to talk about YouTube, because your channel is just absolutely incredible. You've got so many subscribers. So tell us how you started this.
I get that question so often, and it's so
sorry
funny.
To repeat it.
No, it's so good. It's so funny. A lot of people think that I've just started off because I had the idea. No, it happened actually, as a lot of things do in life, happened by a funny coincidence, right? It was that my dad, I was flying with Air Berlin, and I had, great times, all good, but I had a lot of spare time on my hands, and I wanted to do something with it. And I'm not that type of guy who just, I can't binge watch Netflix. It drives me crazy. So I had to do something with spare time. And I did a couple of things. I was a personal trainer for 2 years. I did this and that and all sorts of things. But it never really sort of stuck to me. And so in the end, I was at a flight performing in Munich with Air Berlin, and my dad called me up, and he was reading a newspaper article. It was a bit of a refresher of that incident of the Air France accident from Brazil to Paris, and it was all about the pitot tube. And he didn't really understand that article because it's very, very technical. Although my dad has a really hard technical knowledge, nevertheless, I had 2 hours of turnaround, and I told him, or I offered him, why not? I'll FaceTime with you and I'll show you around it, explain the whole thing. And so that's what I did. I took him out on an outside check. We went through all the systems, and I went up into the cockpit, and we went on and on and on. It was really cool. I want to say a month later or so, I was at my parents' place, Dad and I sitting on the terrace, having a beer, having a blast. And he goes and says, "Hey, Joe, have you actually considered, your passengers? They could be really interested in that kind of FaceTime call we've had, or, explaining stuff. Don't you think that could be like a YouTube thing?" And my dad, at the time, he was like 68 years old. I didn't even think he knew what YouTube was.
That's amazing.
And then I said, it sounds like a lot of work, I'll consider it. So in the first place, we started off with Instagram to see if there is really, people are interested in that. So we uploaded a couple of pictures. It skyrocketed. It just went off the hook. It was really cool. And then I said, okay, I think a year later, or half a year later, I uploaded my first YouTube video. And you cannot believe how nervous I was. I hadn't had any permissions yet from company. No one knew about it. I talked to my friends a little bit about the whole idea and so forth. And you just, if you sort of bring up something new, you will always feel uncomfortable at first. And then, you get the hang of it, and then you get better and better. It's probably the same with your podcast. People probably at the beginning thought, "Oh God, what's Mike up to now?" And then you want to, you gain experience, you get better and better, and so far you get So I uploaded. I think it was one of the first video was about the sterile cockpit, I think it was. And then it sort of continued, and then it was sort of gradually picking up. And then I uploaded a video about reverse thrust. Apparently that was a topic everyone wanted to know about, because that video broke any record I've had so far. And I think it has by now something 1.5 million views or something. And that took a huge part in the success of this Captain Joe YouTube channel, because, then it sort of picked up. And then I got countless comments below that video saying, "Joe, can you do that video? Can you explain this? Can you do this and that?" And I literally wrote a list of all the things that people wanted to know. And from that point on, it was a success story, and it's so much fun. I really like doing it, and I bet it does consume a lot of time, but the rewards, the feedback you get from, to me personally, it's not the financial aspect. That's not really to count for, but what I really see as success is when I get pictures sent from flight students that their instructor has shown my video in their flight school.
That's awesome.
This is absolutely, then you have done something right, because the instructor, I've had feedback talk with one of the instructors, and he said, "Joe, I'm sorry, you have just explained it much more better with visuals and whatnot. And, I could just pop that video on at the end of my session or lesson or whatever. And it's just great, and then and from that point on, I knew I was on the right track, and I just kept going. And then it's just, I really like doing it, and I still like doing it.
It's one of my favorite channels. It's absolutely brilliant. But let's talk about how you come up with your ideas, because it seems like you pick a certain topic and that's what you focus on. And do you have a list or of what you want to record, or is it like spur of the moment? How do you come up with these ideas?
No, it's definitely a lot of the stuff is based on the comments I get or questions which are sent in, because sometimes I don't see that even as a question, and then I thought, okay, that's actually really a good topic to talk about. And also sometimes I'm in the cockpit, and maybe there is something which I, let's say, struggle with, or also have difficulties understanding. For example, just recently there was when I did my first oceanic crossing. That is quite a thing to do. You have to get the oceanic clearance and everything. There's like a book to read just about oceanic clearances or the oceanic crossing. And I thought, okay, why not, make a video more or less for myself to get a better understanding of what it is. And and then obviously that helps. I know others and they watch that video. Funny enough, I haven't even done it yet, but I've done the script for it. It's all ready to go. But, it's sort of, things, if I struggle with a few things, then I assume a lot of others will do the same. Not that I'm universal to everything, but I'm saying is that, if you probably ask 100 people the same question, probably 80% of them will say, I'm struggling with that same problem.
Yeah.
And then you kind of sort of have a direction, okay, this could potentially be an interesting video. And sometimes, I've videos which failed. Some of them no one had no interest at all. Sometimes it's just luck, sometimes it's bad luck, and, you just have to learn from your experiences. And, But
I think what I love about your channel is you're trying to educate, but it's also entertaining, which is a difficult combination to do.
Absolutely, because at one point you have to be serious because you need to be seen and respected as a pilot. You can't be joking around about things. And the same point is, if I do something wrong, if I explain something completely the opposite or make a mistake, trust me, aviators or pilots in general, they will hold me down if I make something wrong. So I really have to be precise on what I say. And sometimes I have colleagues checking on my scripts. They say, okay, Joe, you might want to change this a little bit, go, say this and that, just to be sure that I'm not messing up, and just double check everything. I have made mistakes in the past, and I had to delete a couple of videos because I realized I did a mistake. Okay, it was one time, but still, it's a thing that it's a learning curve. And good Lord, if I look at my videos, which are 2 years old, oh my God, I feel so ashamed to look at them because the audio is horrible. The video is oh my word. And it's a learning curve, and you get better and better at things. And and the people I have met, and funny enough, I have to mention this because this is really. You have no idea how thankful I actually are that we have met, because what I was doing a couple of years, it's a year ago roughly now, was I wanted to do a series about Concorde. And I was Googling, checking on YouTube if anyone else done it. And then I found your video, you interviewing one of probably the most iconic Concorde pilots, John Hutchison. And then we got in contact. You had your email address there. I wrote you up, and then you gave me his contact. And I couldn't even believe it when I wrote him. I said, oh, yeah, I remember the interview with Mike. Yeah, you can come around, whenever you want. I said, are you joking? I thought he's going to reply like in a year or so. But he replied the next day. Yeah. And I was in England at the time. And then I thought, okay, I just might as well go by. And, that to me was one of the most inspiring persons pilots I've met so far. This guy
is a great bloke.
The stories that guy could tell. He could write 10 books just about what he was experiencing with Concorde, or it's incredible. It was really good. So again, Mike, thank you very much for getting it or putting me in touch with John. That was definitely a huge thing in my career.
Let's talk, because obviously I'm on YouTube as well. Do you get any bad comments or hateful comments, and how do you deal with that?
There's always someone who's going to be mock about something. It's not, you can't. If you have a channel of that size, it'll always be 0.02% of guys who are gonna, complain about something. It's just, to be honest, I remember at first, they really caught up on me, and it's the funny thing is you get 2,000 positive comments about Joe. This is all really cool, incredibly helpful, blah, 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 blah. And you get that one comment, Joe, you've full of shit or whatever, some hateful stuff, and that somehow sticks to your mind, right? That is where you can't even go to sleep with. It's ridiculous. I don't know even why, because you see it in comparison. It's a joke, one comment compared to 2,000. But you learn, I've got countless friends to talk about it, and they said, Joe, come on, see the comparison to the positive comments, see the upside, see how many people you're helping. It's, then at one point you just get used to it. I must admit, it has been very, very low on my channel. It's just a few things I can sort of vividly remember. But it's also, the internet is a place where people can hide. If that guy can come up to me and personally say it to myself, then it is criticism I will take. Yeah. But if it's a guy hiding his laptop and just writing a nasty comment because he is bored, probably, okay, that to me is it's a waste of time, and I might as well. You could have
waste
just
of energy. Yeah.
Waste of energy. Yeah. So, but if people, I mean, actually, people approaching me personally saying, "Hey, Joe, criticism here," but then also that was incredibly helpful critique. They said, "Hey, Joe, why don't you do this?" And I was thankful for it. I was really thankful because that improved the channel in many, many ways. And it's just you learn from your mistakes and from the criticism you get.
I think constructive criticism is really helpful, but just negative comments don't really help you at all. But as you probably do now, I just ignore them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what can we expect from your channel in the future? Do you have any big plans coming up for it? Because I think you're a couple 100,000 away from 1 million now subscribers.
1 million, yeah, absolutely. There's a huge thing which I'm planning on. It is very difficult to actually go for it and do it. And the thing is that I personally don't really like the word, or if people call me a influencer, because personally I think I haven't really influenced people. Yeah. I haven't really changed their lives. I've helped them maybe in terms of aviation stuff, but I haven't really helped change someone's life, for example, to become a pilot. So what I'm trying to set up, but it involves a lot of talk with lawyers and everything. It's quite difficult, and especially how we're going to do it is I want to help young aviation enthusiasts or flight students to pay off their flight school bills. Oh, wow. Because flight school is incredibly expensive, and there's nothing I can do about that. And I've spoken to countless flight schools, and there is one flight school which is very fond of my idea that is now still in the process of putting a huge setting up a crowdfunding on YouTube channel, and getting my followers to, donate money to help younger students. That's the whole idea. I haven't. We're working on it. It's a bit difficult to actually put it into place, but that is one of the things I want to do, because I know I have a big audience. But now, what am I going to do with it? And to make a real impact in life, and for me personally, that's one of those bucket list items, is to help someone, like really change someone's life. That is what I think is now is slowly becoming the purpose of my channel, use the amount of followers to help others, and that's I'm hoping to fulfill that. Probably sort of in May, June this year. That's the goal. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like an absolutely cracking idea, Joe. And I think, like, your channel being, I would say, probably one of the biggest aviation channels on YouTube, that you're using it for a positive kind of output, rather than just trying to make money or become famous or whatever. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a few things which I am really, really happy about and thankful that I've, started that channel in the first place. It was never the idea, obviously, to become famous or whatever, because I never thought it was going to pick up that much. But now, you getting me in contact with John Hutchison with the Concorde pilot, then I've spoken to Kennedy Steve. It's one of the most iconic ATC controllers out there. And there's so many people I have met along this journey. And that, to me, is, this is incredible, because I've never expected this to happen like this. And so that, to me, is now also a message of I have to give back to my viewers. And this is, I hope this is going to be one of the chances of doing so. And there's countless other projects which are on the sideline right now, which are coming sort of slowly into place. And it's going to be an incredibly exciting year this year. I know that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be certainly following your channel and also Instagram. But, so where can we actually find you online for our viewers that may not have heard of you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think the biggest one where you can see most of my work is the YouTube channel. If you type into the search box up in YouTube, if you just go Captain Joe, you'll immediately find me. And the same goes for Instagram. We have Fly with Captain Joe. You'll find me there. And but now, where I think a lot of stuff, especially this podcast, is going to be on my website. I'm going to upload it there as well. So I have a website also. It's www.flywithcaptainjoe.com, and there's a bunch of cool information on there. We have also like tons of giveaways. The giveaway thing is like really picking up now. That's a lot of fun, giving things back. And like I've given away my headset and sunglasses and watches and all that kind of stuff. And it's really cool. And so there's a lot of information on there, but those are like the key 3 platforms. It's YouTube, Instagram, and my website. Yeah.
Awesome, Joe. Well, I'm going to ask you a few personal questions now to wrap up, if you're happy with that. So, apart from flying, do you have any hobbies?
Editing movies. No, I do a lot of sports. I have a really close group of mates back in Munich where I do a lot of sports. And I have a girlfriend who needs a lot of attention as well. So yeah, those are my hobbies. Yeah. And to really wrap it up, I have a huge interest for vintage cars. I like restoring old cars. That's what I do a lot with my dad. And yeah, I think those are the biggest hobbies of my life. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
So, what's your favorite military and also civil aviation aircraft?
Okay, the most favorite military.
It's a tough one.
I would have gone with the Tomcat, but I go actually with the Tornado because I've actually flown the Sim once, and that is a cool plane. It's very versatile. You can use it in all sorts of areas. So military-wise, that's the Tornado. And commercial, I think I'm going to go on a limb here, and I think I'm going to say the DC-3.
Okay, I wasn't expecting that.
Nah, because I think the DC-3 it has an incredible history. Funny enough, I'm flying it in April. It's a long story, but no, it's just it's a cool looking plane. It's hands-on flying. I think there's not a single one out of them with an autopilot, if I'm not mistaken. No, it's a good looking plane, and it has done what it was built for. And you can obviously I could have sent an Airbus A320, but that's like just a normal plane. You need a cool plane. Yeah.
And am I correct in thinking that's going to be with? I think there's a series called Ice Pilots. Is it
absolutely? Yes, yeah. They came up to me actually and invited me to come up there, and so yes, we're at the moment planning and doing a week of flying around Yellowknife. Yeah, that's the idea.
Awesome, Joe. And last question, it's probably going to be a difficult one, and you might not be able to answer, but Airbus or Boeing?
Oh, don't ask me that.
I have to do it.
I could have just answered Embraer. No. Gee. All right, it's going to hurt. No, Boeing. It's Boeing.
You're going Boeing.
Okay, slap in the face. No, it's Boeing. Yes, Boeing.
Awesome, Joe. Well, I appreciate you being on the show, and it's been absolutely brilliant to listen to your story. You know how you started in aviation up to your current YouTube career as well. So I just want to say a big thank you to you for coming on the show.
Thank you. Absolutely. I mean, funny enough, you actually picked my cherry today because this is my first podcast interview I've ever given. So it's really cool. I'm thankful that it's with you. And I, again, really appreciate what you've done for me in the past. And I hope the listeners enjoyed our talk. I don't know how long we've been going on for, but what you're doing is it's so incredible for the community, especially the aviation community. And I'm hoping that this is just listened to a couple of people who are like on long commutes. Pilots are a lot on long commutes, and listen to an hour of me and you talking to each other. And that's what this podcast to me is all about. And I really appreciate your work. So thank you very much for having me on.